everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim. We talk about horror movies on this show, and it is October. It is the season to be spooky, because Halloween is this month, and to celebrate, we do a bunch of extra episodes. This is one of them. I mean, I suppose I say that for all of these episodes. Technically, they can't all be extra, because we'd be doing X amount anyway, but whatever. Regardless,
yeah.
we're here to talk about horror movies, and this one is one of a kind. We're going to talk about The Evil Within, not to be confused with the video game of the same title. This is one where the story behind the movie is just as fascinating, arguably more fascinating than the film itself. We will obviously start spoiler free. We'll give you a warning before we get into spoilers. But here we go. So, what is The Evil Within? It was originally titled The Storyteller before they changed the title. At some point before release, but this is a movie that took 15 years to make. It started being shot.
So it must be really good.
Maybe
movies that take a lot of time usually end up being fantastic.
Do you know? It's actually. I mean, I know you're joking, but that's actually the opposite usually. Like usually when they keep working on a movie for a long time, it ends up being more of a mess.
Yeah.
Like that's.
Yeah. Well, that was a joke.
Well, no. I was just like because. You could argue that it should be better if you take a long time, if you take your time with it, if you work on it. But typically it means that it's a mess and they're trying to fix it, and then you end up with just more of a cobbled together mess. But whatever. Right. So this is a movie that took 15 years to make, and it was a personal passion project for a rich person. What was his name? Getty. Andrew Getty. Who was rich because he's part of the Getty oil fortune. So we have this rich guy. He wrote this, directed it himself. He had no experience before he did so. He filmed a lot of it in his own mansion. He built a production suite inside his house, like a post-production suite, so he could edit it and tinker with it for years after the fact. The shooting itself was mostly 2002, but they kept going back and shooting more stuff for years. I believe the actual final shots, from what I could gather from a bit of research, were 2005. So it was shot between 2002 and 2005, and then the next 12 years were editing, special effects, and other tinkering. So, and then to top it all off, Andrew Getty was a meth user. In fact, he died 2 years before this came out. So 2 years ago. This just came out this year. This is a new release in terms of like when it came out. But he died 2 years ago, and the film was sort of finished by the other editor who was sort of working along with it. And here we are. So we finally get to see a movie that was made by a meth addict, an inexperienced meth addict who wrote and directed the whole thing by himself over 15 years.
This is. I'm so happy that we're finally doing this movie, because I hadn't heard about it until earlier this year, and I read an article about it that's basically laying out like everything you said, and I don't want to immediately be like, oh, this is a bad movie, let's make fun of it, and also I've been thinking a lot in terms of like what makes a movie bad versus like what's actually really bad, and versus what's someone's just really strange, weird vision of the world. And I was after hearing everything about this, like a movie 15 years in the making, made by the son of like a rich oil tycoon who is a meth addict, like this was like setting off all these buzzers in my brain that it's like I don't know if this is going to be good, crazy, or awful, but whatever it is, I knew it was going to be like an experience that I had to see.
You said it was 15 years in the making, and I think it's worth mentioning that usually when someone says a movie's 15 years in the making, 20 years in the making, it usually means that the idea was there and like maybe they had a script, but the actual making of the movie didn't happen until the last couple of years. Usually it takes a couple of years to make a movie, and that's when that happened. Very rarely does it mean that it was shot 15 years ago and they've been tinkering with it all that time. That is not what that usually means, but in this case it does mean that.
Yeah.
So I had so many random expectations going into this, and I had no idea what the plot actually was And I didn't want to know. I was just ready to go in and kind of, and that's a big thing for me in this movie. I had no idea. There's a certain point about 5-10 minutes into this movie when I said, "Oh no, tell me that's not what this is. Tell me this is not what this is about."
Yeah, I kind of wish maybe I'd gone in with that, but I had watched the trailer before, so I was like, oh boy, I think I know what we're getting into.
Yeah, I had not seen a trailer. I did not know what, who the main character was, what his condition was, more than that in a little bit. I had none of this knowledge. So the movie opens with this like couple of dream sequences that are very kind of surreal and like, and then it gets to this point where the main character's narrating it, and he's talking about how he's had nightmares since he's a kid, and he sort of shows us one of these nightmares. He shows us what a new nightmare's like for him, and he's narrating this the whole time, and it's all kind of very, insightful. He's talking about the meaning of dreams and where they come from, and it's all this kind of like in-depth kind of analysis of dreams. And then it's like, and here's me today with my brother and his girlfriend having a picnic at the park. And like, okay, he's like, oh, I should let you know one more thing. My inside voice is a lot more confident than my outside voice. This is what I actually sound like. And then you hear him talking in the scene, and it becomes very apparent that he is a special needs person. And I immediately went, oh no. Because,
well, I mean, I'm sure they treat it with the utmost dignity and respect, and that you would think.
No, see, this is the thing, because this is like this weird passion project by this one person that's outside of the movie business system. Like the studio system is not involved in this. This is one rogue man doing all this. I immediately got worried because there's no, because if this was being made at Warner Brothers, right, they would take one look at this script and go, this is insensitive, don't do this.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, that's not to say that you can't have a character like this and it couldn't be done with tact and with taste. It can be.
Sure.
However, the story of this movie is that this special needs, this mentally challenged person begins to hear an evil version of himself talking to him from mirrors, and then convinces himself to become a serial killer. That is the premise of this movie, is that someone who's mentally challenged becomes a dangerous serial killer.
I mean, there are points where, like, he literally, or the evil version of him literally says, like, you need to kill to fix your brain.
Yes.
Whoa.
My jaw was on the floor as soon as it became clear that this is what this character was. I was like, no, this can't be it. This can't be where this movie's going. So we'll talk more about that, of course, as we go. But here, I do want to give it a couple of compliments, actually. But before I say anything else, because obviously when I'd heard this story, this one nut job who spent 15 years making this movie, and I say nut job flippantly. I'm not really being serious when I say that. I'm just kind of. But I'm like, okay, I'm expecting The Room. I'm expecting something that doesn't look or feel like an actual movie. I'm expecting something that feels like some novice has come in and not know what he's doing. But to his credit, it does look like an actual movie. Mm-hmm. So I'll give it that. It clearly, he was rich, so he obviously hired people who knew how to film something. So it doesn't look like it's not a movie. I will say occasionally the audio quality, the recording of the dialogue on the actors, occasionally there was some distortion on that. You could tell they'd maybe recorded that a little bit too loud and they had to turn it down. But when you do that, you get like distortion on the actors' voices and it sounds a bit rough.
Yeah. What I would probably say, and like you, I was expecting some giant disaster, like, hey, this is going to be the next Room, Troll 2 kind of thing that we laugh and say, oh, haha, look how bad it is or whatever. But as I was watching it, I really don't think it's poorly made. It's just the story and the dialogues and stuff. That is what's awful and crazy and cringeworthy. But I kind of like the direction in this movie, like the special effects and like the dream sequences. I thought a lot of that stuff looked pretty cool. And it seemed to be done in maybe like a lot of like stop motion practical kind of stuff that I thought was interesting and good. It's just
that's what took 15 years. It was one man doing all these effects by himself.
It's just unfortunately it's mired in this really crazy problematic story.
Yeah, let's stick with you mentioned the direction there. Let's stick with that for a little bit, because I think you're actually being a little bit too kind in saying the direction's good, because here's something else you need to realize. So I mentioned this was shot over like 4 or 5 years, the actual, the actual shooting of the scenes. You get the impression that it wasn't so much that, like, they had to go back. I imagine he had to go back and fix and reshoot a lot of the same scenes that he'd already done. I feel like some scenes in here are better directed than others, and I think the ones that are better are the ones that he shot later, because he got better at it. I think I read that the main actor and Michael Berryman were the only actors who were sort of involved for the entirety of all the shoot. And I think it stands out because their scenes together are typically the best ones. When it gets creepy is when the movie's at its best. And I think that's because he didn't need the other actors, he could redo those as much as he wanted. So he just kept doing them until he actually got it right. Because it feels so, like, you can feel that it's cobbled together. One of the first things I noticed in this movie is that because it was shot over such a long period of time, the actors' haircuts were constantly changing scene to scene. There was times when the brother character had like a really tight, not buzz cut, but like really tight haircut. And then there was other times where it was kind of longer and it was kind of like, like dangling a little bit. And here's the other thing that shocked me about this. This has real actors in it. I just mentioned Michael Berryman from Hills Have Eyes. Dina Meyer's in this. She's a proper actress. She's been in big movies. She's in lots of TV shows.
Yeah, there's one guy towards the end who had a really small part, but I recognize him as like a character actor, like not a huge guy, but a guy that I'm like, oh, I definitely have seen him, and stuff before.
And then the brother character, I didn't really recognize him, but he's also been in stuff. I looked at his IMDb. In fact, he was in the last Saw movie, of all things.
Oh, wow.
And funnily enough, Dina Meyer was in like 3 of the Saw movies in the middle. She was in the first one, and she was in like 2 and maybe 4. Was she in 4? I think she was in like 1 to 4. But
she did look familiar. That's probably where I must have seen.
Oh, she's been in tons of stuff. She's in Starship Troopers. She's been in tons of TV shows. She's a proper prolific actress who pops up in a lot of things. But that shocked me as soon as like this started. I'm like, I was expecting the Room caliber of like these non-actors or Birdemic even. And to be fair, there's he had enough money to actually pay people. Although it makes me wonder, because I mentioned on Wikipedia that there was disputes with the actors occasionally, and that's why only some of them were there for the whole time. And I have to imagine that they hated this movie, like making it. I can only imagine like the proper actors who were brought in to make this. I can only imagine that they they shot the bulk of it in 2002, and then they're asked to come back in like a year later, 2 years later. The haircuts are completely different. They try and like her hair especially, like it changed color. Like it would have like a sort of reddishness to it, and then like the second scene you see her and it's completely jet black, and it's like, okay, she was clearly shooting something else.
I mean, it's hard to imagine like, if people have their own scenes or whatever, it's fine. But then as soon as you have to do a scene with Dennis there, and again he's just doing that full on like crazy portrayal of a mentally challenged person. Like I can't imagine being an actor and being like, not wanting to take someone aside and being like, should we be doing this? Like,
I can't imagine them being on set. Like, is this a good idea? Is this? And this is another thing. He spent a lot of money on sets. Apparently, he built like almost every location that's interior in this. If it's not just in his mansion, which I'm assuming just the main house is his mansion, like he built the set, like the ice cream shop, the restaurant. Which, by the way, there's like 3 separate scenes where the brother and his girlfriend, which is Dina Meyer's character, they go to a restaurant to have dinner. And every single time it's the same restaurant and it's the exact same table they're sitting at. And I'm like, at least move them to a different corner or something to try and hide it. But no, they're in the exact same spot next to the fireplace.
It's funny because I had just finished reading The Disaster Artist, which was a phenomenal book. And, there's a lot of stuff in there about Tommy Wiseau and being so insistent on doing stuff that was not like smart, like wanting to build entire like alleyway sets when they could have just filmed in the alleyway right next to it and stuff. And I wonder if there's a similar little bit of that going on here where Andrew Getty is like, no, like we need to build this entire thing. It's like, well, we could just like rent out a restaurant for probably somewhat cheap and just shoot a scene there. And...
Yeah, comparatively, because like at one point they go to like a pizza restaurant, and there's like animatronic puppets like playing instruments. There's like an octopus playing the drums on the stage, and like he spent money on this to have all this here. Like this is, but this is the weird thing about this movie is that as much as some of it's so ill advised, like the central concept is kind of offensive, but at the same time, and as much as it doesn't quite work in a lot of ways, it is such a passion project that he cared so deeply about this that he spent the last 15 years of his life, he spent tinkering with this to make sure every visual effect, everything he wanted to do was perfect. There's this weird, genuine feeling going on. Like, as you're watching, you don't feel like you're watching some stupid thing that someone, like, you get the feeling that he really cared about this. Like, he was pouring his heart and soul into this.
See, this is what I love about movies like this versus just like a generic bad movie, because I think there's like what makes watching stuff like this or The Room so enjoyable. It's not because it's bad, because anyone can make a bad movie, like that's not that hard to do.
Well, I can. I'll make good movies, but that's fine.
Well, all right, you're the exception, but yeah, like if you don't have talent or whatever, and you don't know where to point a director or a camera or how to direct people or whatever, you can make a really bad movie that's not fun to watch.
You tell Tim doesn't know how to make a movie. He's like, where do you put the director?
Why is the director not on screen? But what I find so fascinating and enjoyable about these kind of movies is that even if it doesn't work, the director clearly had a vision. It's not just some guy that doesn't know what he's doing saying, I want to make a movie. Let's make a movie. This is a guy that is like, no, I have a specific vision that I want to bring to the screen. And for better or worse, he does it. And it's a strange, surreal glimpse into this guy's life.
Yeah, that's meth addict, might I add, which explains some of the movie, honestly.
He's a meth addict. I read like a little bit that this is kind of based on like nightmares and stuff that he had as a child, that he kind of came up with this weird reasosoning for why we dream, and that there's like other people that whisper these stories into us. And so it's like weird.
It's basically the idea that, because at one point he tells these brothers like our dreams, again he's doing his special needs kind of impression as he's doing this. But he's telling his brother, like, our dreams just like one part of my brain talking to another part of my brain. But these dreams are so dark that I'm convinced it's someone else telling my brain these things. So and he sees that. He sees like this, demonic Michael Berryman in the mirror, and then it becomes him in the mirror, and like then the perversion in the mirror starts talking normally to him, and like, you have to do this. You have to start killing people. And you have to, like, this will make you better. This will make you smarter. It's really. It's such an ill-advised concept, and it's so like
it's not I wouldn't say it's a good movie, but it is fascinating. And
it's fascinating. That's a great word for it. It's fascinating. Sometimes it's fascinating because some of the creepy scenes are really well pulled off. Like some of the dreams, some of the imagery that comes up is actually like at one point in the early dream when he's a kid and his mother's with him. She takes off her sunglasses and there's like two little mouths where her eyes should be, and it's like proper nightmare feel. Like there's some genuinely creepy imagery at points.
Yeah, and I really like stuff with dreams. I like the surreal, strange quality to it, and I feel like it does kind of encapsulate like sometimes how it feels to be stuck in a nightmare. And obviously we're not into spoils yet, but I'll say I thought the ending, like, actually, again, kind of similar to the beginning, it had some really cool, like, crazy looking stuff in it that I kind of enjoyed.
That's the thing.
Like a non-ironic level.
Yeah, like most of it's so ill advised, but there's these odd moments, these sparse moments throughout where it's like, oh, that was actually kind of inventive and creepy, and like there's these little things just peppered throughout. But then you come back to the main character who's doing this. And I don't know if it's necessarily the actor's fault who's doing this, because the actor doing this, Frederick Koehler, he is in other stuff. Like if I click on his name here, Like, he's been in proper things. Where are we? He was in Pearl Harbor. Okay, it's maybe not the best. But he's been on TV shows and stuff. I was in a couple of Torchwood episodes. You know, he's done things. I was in Lost. Who was he in Lost? I've seen Lost.
Someone in Dharma or something, maybe?
I love Lost. Yeah.
But, I mean, yeah, he's, like... I don't know, I guess it would be weird to say, like, he's doing the best he can or whatever, but it's you know, probably a lot more to do with the direction than it, you know, is, like, with him as an actor or whatever. It's just, unfortunately, just very ill-advised.
Yes. We've said that phrase a lot, but ill-advised really is the name of the game today. He has this crush on this girl who works at the ice cream place, and again, this is showing you how long ago this was made. Is like, I was looking through the actors because, like I said, I was looking up the others and seeing like what they'd been in, like, because I'd recognised obviously two of them, but I was curious about the others. Interestingly, there's a social services woman who's trying to like take him away from his brother. When I looked her up, funnily enough, she's an older actress, but she was actually in, like, the first image I got for her when I looked her name up was that she was Mary in an episode of Star Trek, the original series from season 1, which, because me and Connor have been working through that and reviewing that for the channel, and it was just, oh man, that's weird that, like, I just watched her as a teenager in something from the 60s recently, but like, yeah, so she's in stuff. But the girl who works at the ice cream place, Brianna Brown is the actress. Her character's name's Susan. When I looked her up, and this one stuck out more than any of the others, because in the movie, like, she looks like she's, you know, like in her early 20s. You know, she's kind of intentionally this sort of attractive blonde that he's got the hots for. That's kind of the point.
She literally, like, calls herself hot. Like,
she does.
That's like how she, like, introduces herself to people.
And you can tell, like, I think the other actors come off a little bit better than the guy playing Dennis does, because they all kind of react to him appropriately for the most part.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You know,
like, there's some stuff, like, behind his back sometimes they make...
Oh, sure. Dina Meyer's character comes off awful whenever he's not around, because she's basically saying, yeah, dump him in a hospital, I don't want to move in with him. Like there's those kind of lines. So she comes off quite badly in that sense. But anyway, this actress, Brianna Brown, when I looked her up, her photo was like, wait, she looks different in this. What? And I was like, oh, that's because she's 38 now.
Oh, wow. And
I'm like, damn, like that just shows you how long it's been since they shot those scenes. Like the actors have aged so much, and the movies just came out. And it's just, I don't know, it's fascinating. It's really one of a kind. Like, there's only one room, and there's only one evil within. And I'm just comparing those two because those are the two that spring to mind. But this is the kind of thing I can see this having a cult following that people go and watch it years from now.
I mean, without a doubt, I know. Like, it's a little tough because I think it's a little bit of a harder watch than something like The Room or whatever. But this is definitely something that I'm, like, itching to talk to people about. I do want to show it to people because, again, it's like just something like, all right, let's discuss what the hell we just watched.
It's so unfiltered. It's kind of that thing where if anyone could just go and make a movie without experience, you'd end up with, like, tons of this crap. But because making movies is so expensive, you know, people can't do that. But you've got this one guy who was just rich enough to just do it. And as a result, we end up with this weird specimen of a movie, this oddity of just craziness. I
know for sure, like, I don't know if they're gonna, if it does get, like, a big enough cult following, if they'll start doing stuff like this. But I'd love to watch, like, a documentary about this, or if, someone that worked on it, if they write kind of like a tell-all book, because right now this is streaming on Prime, so if anyone has a Prime membership, you can watch it for free, and I'd recommend doing that before we go into spoilers, because, again, it's just a really weird, one-of-a-kind watch. But
I wonder what reaction you'd get from, like, Dina Meyer if you were interviewing her and you thought, oh, by the way, you did this movie called Evil Within. Like, would she be like, no, we're not talking about that, move on, next question. Like, would she want to talk about it? Like, I can't imagine this was a pleasurable experience. I mean, maybe Getty was a nice director, a nice guy, but this feels so unprofessional, the way it was shot and the way it was put together, that I can't imagine the actors had anything but bad things to say about the experience.
Yeah, so I really want to check to see if you know, well, like I said, it's streaming right now. If there is like an actual like DVD or Blu-ray of it, if there are special features, I might actually buy this because like if they have any kind of commentary or making of or something behind the scenes, I'd be really interested to see what that looks like.
It's really fascinating. And by the way, there's a dream sequence at one point where Brianna Brown does full frontal nudity in this dream, and I literally yelled out loud when it got to that scene, "Not for this movie! Don't do it for this movie! Come on, you can't." I mean, seriously, like how does this conversation go? That this guy's funding this movie on his own. How does this not feel a little bit creepy to say, like, okay, right, you gonna go nude? Like, are you comfortable with this? Like, I don't know. I can't imagine the uncomfort and the, you know, you get this meth addict director like directing you. And it's just.
Well, I mean, should we jump into the spoilers at this point?
Yeah, I think we're ready to go. So full spoilers for The Evil Within from this point on. What did you want to bring up?
Jeez, I don't even know
where to start.
Where to begin.
Yeah, it's because obviously I think early on in the movie it's just a case of, okay, he's doing this really wacky performance, an insensitive performance, and the other characters are kind of arguing about their lives and how they have to put up with them, like, behind his back, and it's like, okay, right.
The thing that I was a little confused by is with the brother, I wasn't sure if he wanted to get rid of him, because you know he's like, oh, trying to sell the house, like, you know, because I want to put him in a hospital, but he wants to put him in like a good hospital, but like, I don't know, it seems like there are points where he's like, no, like, we're family, like, you can't break us up, like, I'm his guardian, and then it seems like there's moments where he's like, you know, oh, I need to get rid of this guy, I need to, you know, find a good hospital for him.
I think what the intention is that he's conflicted, because he wants to get rid of him because he knows it makes more sense, but then he feels guilty. But the movie doesn't really do a good job.
He was the reason that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was such a like. I mean, can that cause this? Like, can get a hit in the head cause this condition? I don't think it can.
I feel like not to this extreme, especially to the point where they were saying he was like
a genius.
Yeah. like until like one of the world's smartest men.
Until the age of 6, he was like one of the smartest kids on the planet. He was learning like advanced math from books and everything else. And then I accidentally knocked him down the stairs, and now he's like this. Like, I don't know. It's so, if nothing else, even if it's possible, which I highly doubt it is, it's so ham-fisted of like a sort of motivation for this character to not want to get rid of him. It's so but so it keeps going, and like Dina Meyer's kind of pissed that she's not being proposed to, and it's kind of whatever. But then so Dennis keeps getting these nightmares, and he keeps like seeing, and honestly the nightmare scenes are actually kind of good. Like, you know, when he sees like the Michael Berryman's like character in the mirror, and he sees the creepy things happen. Like that first time you see him, where he's just kind of like against the wall, and then it sort of fades, and it's just a pile of clothes. It's actually kind of a good little moment. Like, there's little moments like that that do work.
Yeah, and like when he like attaches the zipper to his back and then unzips him and like crawls into his skin, like I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool.
I'm just going to say that again, just so you understand, just because that's a really wacky sentence to say. When like, so basically, Dennis is lying almost kind of paralyzed on the bed, face down. Michael Berryman comes up, and he has like a sort of just zip on its own, and then he presses it into his back. It's almost as if it's got little sort of spikes that sort of go into the back of the guy's back. And then once he's got it all in, which looks painful in and of itself, he unzips it and then goes into his body and zips it back up. It is a really surreal scene, but it's actually really effective because I've never seen anything like it before. It's pretty cool.
And then also, I have no idea, like, is there something special about this mirror that, like, because it seems that he has these crazy messed up dreams, like, for a long time, but then he doesn't actually start seeing the Michael Berryman, I don't know, I guess Legion character until the mirror is actually brought up.
He is credited as Cadaver, just for, for the record. But I don't think there's anything special about the mirror. I think the whole idea is that it was just like the idea of him looking at his reflection was going to make him sort of like reflect on himself, which is kind of what happens, because it eventually starts seeing like this alternate version of himself talking to him in the mirror, who at first is talking like him in the sort of broken language, and then eventually starts talking with a regular voice. But he's like, there's a way to get better, they've just not told you how to do it. And okay, where's this going? It's like, okay, how do I get better? And I'm not doing the voice, by the way. I'm just speaking normally, because I'm not doing an impression of a special needs person. You're not getting that tapping on camera. And he's like, oh, you have to kill a kitty cat. And I'm like, oh god, they better not show this happening. And to be fair, they don't. They cut away before he does it, but he convinces him to kill the neighbour's cat. And the whole thing is just so poor taste, because he's like, but the cat likes me. It's like, well, that'll make it easier to catch it. And it's just, what are you doing? And then it actually cuts to him opening a freezer, and he's killed like several cats and dogs, and he's got them on ice.
That's what's crazy about it, is how casual like the killing is, because it kind of upgrades from like cats to kids and stuff, and then it's always like starting off with, you have to kill a cat, you have to kill a kid, and then it's like, okay, and then you'll see a quick scene of him about to kill someone, but then it always cuts to like, all right, I've killed 4 kids now. It's like, it's like, oh, I guess like he's been busy in the time we haven't seen like what he's been doing.
Yeah, and the fact that he's able to do this without his brother like noticing that something's going on.
Yeah,
because eventually the brother comes home. And he's like, wait, what's that noise? It's like downstairs, like he's doing some woodwork. We've seen that he's gotten some DVDs of like taxidermy and like biology and like other stuff. And his brother notices these DVDs and he's like, Dennis, what is all this? Why are you looking at all this material? This is insane. And he basically just says, oh, I mixed the guy at the store mixed his bag up with someone else's. So this is actually some other guy's DVDs. He's like, oh, that makes sense then. And despite the fact that his brother's special needs, despite the fact that he sounds like he's working dangerous machinery, because he thinks he's doing DIY. He thinks he's been he jokes about, oh, maybe he'll become a carpenter. Like, you don't think it'd be worth to check to see if he's being safe with the tools and instruments?
Yeah, especially at some point he starts complaining about a bad smell coming from the basement.
Yeah, it's in the same scene. He smells something bad. But yeah, he's like, okay, you don't want to show me for a few days? I'll accept that.
Yeah.
No. Never.
And I do think there is some like weird lines of like room-esque kind of dialogue. Like the social worker character, it's very strange when she shows up, and they have like in the way in the room where everyone it's very blunt and like straightforward and just saying stuff without any kind of like preamble. Like she kind of shows up out of nowhere and is just like, basically like, hey, we're gonna take your kid. Like, someone called us and told us he might be abusive. And
yeah, because see at that point, see when she said someone called us anonymously, I thought it might be the girlfriend. Yeah. And I thought that might be a revelation later that leads to something, but it's never brought up again. No one ever asks who called.
Yeah, and also I think her name is Mildy, and it just sounds like so weird when he's talking to her, because he uses her name a lot. He's like, listen, Mildy, here's the thing, Mildy. You don't know anything, Mildy. Get out of my house, Mildy. It's just like this weird, surreal dialogue where it doesn't really sound like this is the way people talk.
Yeah, there's some other weird, like, there's an entire subplot where the brother's going to like a therapist.
Yeah.
And then he can't afford the therapy anymore, so the therapist agrees to just see him at lunch and just give him free therapy. And it's like, okay. But what did it actually add? I mean, I think it's supposed to add depth to his character, because it's showing how conflicted he is and how he has problems, but it never really does anything with it. It's just kind of...
And it leads to maybe one of the most bizarre scenes in the movie towards the end, where he thinks he sees his therapist, but it's this like giant man that gets so angry at him.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that scene.
It is so bizarre.
It's really bizarre. So after killing some kids, Dennis is like, evil Dennis, who says he's from the dark, and he wants to swap places with actual Dennis, because you'll like it over here, you'll be fixed over here, and if I get out there, I'll be alive.
Well, let's not gloss over I forget about a little bit about the timeline, so I'm not sure if we're past this point or whatever. But after he kills the kids and he starts talking about Susan at the ice cream shop, who he has crush on, and his dark version is telling him like, oh, like she'll never like you, she won't like a special needs person, but a serial killer, oh, she would
also,
like that.
I liked how you cleaned up that dialogue there, because the actual line was she would never F a retard. That was the exact line that he says to himself. Again, talking about this being ill-advised, talking about this being poor taste. Like, this is someone who did not think about what they were writing as they were writing it. This is okay, this is fine. No, don't get me wrong, I think there's almost a justification for that type of, like, if you're inside someone like this's head, like, and they're worried about what people are being calling them, it would make sense to an extent that they would be like, have this like self-doubt in there, right?
I love this logic of maybe she'd like me if I was a serial killer.
Yeah, because what he says, it's like, a serial killer, oh, that's mysterious, that's exciting, she'll like that. Oh my god, the whole thing is just so poor taste in that sense. So he goes to the ice cream shop, which, by the way, just while we're on the ice cream shop, later on in the movie, the brother actually says the line to the girlfriend, let's go to the ice cream shop for a coffee. That's a line of dialogue that comes out of his mouth. I don't know, I've never heard anyone say that before, but sure. So we actually, this is probably the first time, it feels like a horror movie before, but this is the first time where one of the kill sequences, it feels more like a horror movie, because we actually cut to the ice cream shop and she's on her own and she's like hearing a noise and she like goes and checks it out, and it's like, your traditional sort of slasher movie kind of setup, and then there's a jump scare with Dennis just kind of jumps out, and
I guess he knows like parkour at some point.
No, we're not there yet. We're not there.
Okay.
Because there's a whole scene before this, Tim, where it's just a regular jump scare where she's like, it's just you, Dennis, and then they start talking, and he's like, oh, I bought a journal, just so I can take down thoughts. And she's like, but can you read? And he's like, oh no, but like I get someone else to write it down for me, and then I get my brother to read it to me later. And so, oh, that's dead sweet. Do you want me to write something down for you? And he gets her to write like I can't remember how it starts, but it basically turns into this really awkward. Oh yes, Susan at the ice cream shop. We could be good boyfriend girlfriend, and we could do this and that, and
maybe something about having babies.
Yeah, and she starts to get a little bit freaked out. She's like, "Oh, you're kidding, right, Dennis?" Like, why would I be kidding? It's like, I would just feel more comfortable if you're kidding. And then he's like, "Yeah, but you're."
To be fair, I think she probably handled it the best she could.
Oh, sure.
That is a very awkward.
Yeah, like as far as what she could do in this situation, like this is probably the best she could handle it. Absolutely.
Even if you take out the, if this was a person with special needs, even if it's like a regular person, doing something in a similar roundabout way, it would still be super, super awkward.
Oh, sure. Oh, it would be, yeah. I think there's an extra awkwardness, though, because I think if it was a regular person, you could be a bit more like, okay, you're making me uncomfortable. Whereas in this case, he doesn't understand that he's making her uncomfortable.
True, yeah.
So there's like, with a regular person, there's an expectation like, okay, you know what you're doing here, so I can kind of criticize you for how you're going about this. Whereas with someone with special needs, it's like, okay, you don't understand what you're doing here, so I have to give you some leeway. But she does try and say like, I'm spoken for, and that's when he gets mad. He's like, no, you were only with him for a month, and he's like, he knows all these things, and he's like, he gets really angry, and it gets, kind of heated, and he has to leave. He gets upset, and then she hears more noises. She goes back to check out the back, and this is when he Spider-Mans out of a small cupboard.
Which, the strange thing is, we know that there's this weird dark version that lives in the mirrors that's telling him to do these things, but we never really got the sense that he's been, I don't know, giving him powers or anything, but all of a sudden he can do stuff that not even a regular person could do.
For a start, he goes outside, and like he really couldn't have gotten back into that cupboard in the time it takes her to walk back to that room. And then secondly, the cupboard's too small for him. He kind of just like comes out and he does this kind of flip past her and then kills her. It's just, well, he doesn't actually kill her. He tries to kill her. He chases her out of the shop and she gets hit by a car. That's how she actually dies.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's
and it's strange that we never really get much idea of like what the cops are doing, because at this point there has to be a string of pets and children, and now this person.
Now, to be fair, at least with this person, it looks like an accident.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because she gets hit by a car. She runs out onto the road and she gets hit by a car. So at least this one, it looks kind of innocent-esque, right? But here's the thing, so it gets taken to a restaurant, because this is where Dana Meyer's character is trying to, like, oh, I want to, like, try and make an effort to be like a family with, you know, your brother. So they go to this restaurant where the octopus is playing the drums, as I mentioned, and Dennis goes to the bathroom and he just decides to kill a guy in the bathroom randomly.
I actually kind of like the way they did this, because it's a super quick cut where it's just like, you know, hey, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and it's not like, you know, it just I think they show him going in, you know, through the hallway and then entering the bathroom, but then it just like jumps to him stabbing someone in the face.
Yeah, in the cubicle, and then he starts freaking out and saying, "Oh, you didn't even tell me to do that when I just did it. I'm getting better at this."
And he just dumps the body out the window.
Yeah,
like he just like picks it up, goes over to the window.
The actual way the kill is shot is actually quite good. Like, I actually kind of like the sudden sort of nature of it. The way he just kind of jumps into the cubicle and stabs a guy in the face.
Yeah.
But he comes out of the bathroom, and that's when we get this weird dream sequence where he sees the naked Susan, and she, like, as much as I was like, oh no, don't do nudity for this movie, please. Like, you're going to regret this in life. But it actually turns into this cool kind of little nightmare sequence, because she kind of morphs into this kind of backwards spider thing that's crawling along the floor, and her boobs are like on her back. It's like really weird.
It's like very like Silent Hill-esque.
Or even like, maybe not on her back, but it's almost like her legs and arms have bent the opposite way, and she's doing like a sort of crab walk. But it's like really, it's very stop motion. It's very surreal. And then he kind of wakes up at the table, which, because they do that a lot in the movie, where something creepy happens, and he kind of realizes he's dozed off and he's, you know, he's away in his head. Which maybe he says maybe he didn't kill someone, maybe he just fell asleep at the table.
Yeah, that's. I wasn't sure at points in this movie if we're supposed to believe everything that's happening, or if some of it or all of it, if it's supposed to be just stuff going on in this guy's head or in his dreams.
Well, I think the fact that he gets arrested at the end and goes to a mental hospital would imply that he's done some of it. Because there's this whole thing in the middle of the movie. So after he's killed Susan, there's a bit of time that passes kind of off camera, and the brother on Dana Meyer's character, they go out to their usual little outside, not the main restaurant they have dinner, but there's like an outside one they go to. Maybe it's the same place, so it just looks different because it's daytime.
I think it's where him and his therapist have been having lunch.
And they go there, and that's the scene with the tall guy who he thinks is his therapist. But they basically start to notice that their waitress isn't there. They go to the ice cream shop for coffee, as I mentioned. Susan's not there. They just hear about this now. They can't find his therapist. And there's a scene where they're literally driving around the city, and they're looking down the streets like, why don't we recognize anyone? Everyone we know is not around today. Why are they all sick? This is weird.
Yeah. Again, it just goes back to that thing where it's like, I guess he's been doing a lot more killing than it seems. Like, if you're just going by what you see in the movie, it seems like maybe he killed 2-3 people.
Let's just make this clear, right? What's happening right now at this point in the movie is that without them noticing, he has killed off every single person they know. And they're like, this is weird. Why is everyone we know not around today? Like, that is literally what happens at this point in the movie. They're driving around the city of, I don't know, where are they, LA? I have no idea. But
probably, yeah.
Yeah, it looks sunny enough. But they're driving around and they're like, why don't we recognize anyone? To be fair, I'm pretty sure at any point in a city you could drive down a main street and go, I don't recognize anyone in the street.
Yeah.
Well, of course you don't. There's millions of people in the city.
Yeah, unless you live in like a small, tight-knit community or something. But yeah, any big city, I never see anyone I recognize on the streets.
Oh, dear.
Now, I do just want to go back to real quick to the pizza place, because I think it's pretty important. It comes into play in the last half of the movie. Just the idea of him seeing the animatronics and kind of being fascinated by the idea of, like, robotics or puppetry and, kind of controlling these things. I actually do think, like, that's a nice little setup for what that last final, scene in the movie basically becomes.
Yeah, it foreshadows what he's going to do at the end of the movie. So basically, the brother finds out that he didn't get his books and DVDs swapped, that it was him looking up the taxidermy, and Dina Meyer's already decided to go and talk to Dennis on her own to try and bond with him. And he's like, oh no, this is bad. He might actually be killing people. And he drives off, or he gets a taxi to go back to the house. Dina Meyer's been stabbed already. And the brother comes in, he goes out of the basement, and he ends up sitting in the chair. Because why he sits in the chair with a smile on his face to see what Dennis has built, I don't know. Because he's already worried that something bad's going on at this point. But he sits down in the chair and then finds out that it's been glued, like there's glue all over it, so he can't get up. He's like, his arms are like sticking to it. Very Saw-like, actually, just to go back to the fact that he was in a Saw movie. But so basically, Dennis is on stage and he's emptied out Dina Meyer and he's using her as a puppet and he's like doing a ventriloquist act with her. And at first,
sorry, but there was like a weird scene in the beginning out of nowhere where you see him like practicing kind of like a stand-up routine in front of the mirror.
So, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Like, I don't know if he has like some type of like desire to perform or something that kind of comes out at the end here, but
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Well, maybe that's the whole idea of the storyteller, and like it's actually part of his brain that wants to tell stories.
Okay, yeah.
That's like a performance thing. He wants to do that, but he's got her on his lap, and he's like, making her move, and it takes the brother a long time to notice that she's dead.
Yeah,
it's a natural long amount of time, and then like everyone else is killed. Like the therapist is like his head's on something. The social worker's head's on like this spider that he's made with legs, kind of like the octopus, and like all the people he's killed. And you see like the story of their childhood, like the whole story of him like throwing them down the stairs. You see like the two kids that he's murdered. They're puppets in the background and they're acting that out. It's all marionette-esque, and like it's just this deranged thing. And then it's funny we keep comparing it to The Room because it actually ends in a very kind of similar way, where the brother takes a gun, puts it in his mouth, and kills himself.
And it's strange because Dennis is like the main character, or seems like the main character of the whole movie, and it seems like everything is trying to be him trying to become better. And then in the end, it seems like, well, it doesn't really seem like that was the goal. It seems like the goal was to torment his brother in this like one big giant final nightmare for him.
It basically became a revenge movie.
Yeah.
In a weird way, and it never felt like that until the last like 20 minutes. It was kind of strange. And then you see what looks like him getting grabbed by like a big giant spider, but then like it changes and you realize it's the police like arresting him. And we end with this, and the narration, which was gone the whole movie from the start, like because it was there at the start of the movie, it comes back in at the end to show that, because it's actually at this point we should mention that he's actually swapped places. It's the evil Dennis that's in the real world now. There's a scene where he pulls him into the mirror and then he comes out. And this is actually because the two cops with the social worker show up before all this goes down, and it's just after he's switched places in the mirror, and evil Dennis basically goes around the house killing them all. And he does seem to have superpowers because he hides in the mirror and jumps out. He morphs his face. He suddenly has all these superpowers. It's weird. And I guess the idea is that it's just in his head, and it's just kind of the representation of what he's doing. But man, you can tell the director this was on meth. It's pretty insane.
Yeah. Jeez.
But like I say, like unlike your usual direct-to-video crap, which this looks like, in the terms, see the poster? See if you're like browsing Amazon and you see the poster of this, it looks like any other generic, cheap horror movie that you probably don't want to watch. But unlike those, there is a genuine kind of passion that you feel as you're watching it, which is kind of what separates the real shit from the shit that's worth watching. And by that I mean like The Room. The Room's this movie where it's terrible, but it's fascinating to watch because this, Tommy Wiseau poured his heart and soul into it, and he actually was trying to make a good movie, and he thinks he did. And this is kind of the same thing where this Getty guy, he spent years perfecting this, and you can feel that on the screen. Like it does feel cobbled together. Like you say, you can see the haircuts changing between the scenes. You can tell that he tried to save various things in the edits, and the audio sometimes isn't recorded that well, but compared to The Room, and especially compared to something like Birdemic, the technical qualities are through the roof in comparison to those.
Yeah, I think like one of the big differences is a bad movie just makes you kind of go, oh, this is bad. The person who made this sucks. But like a good bad movie makes you go, what were they thinking? Like I want to be in this guy's head that to understand what made them think like we should do this and we should do it this way. And like it's just so I find it so interesting and and curious.
Yeah, just to go back on something you said there, you said a bad, like an actual just bad, boring movie, like the director that just sucks. I wouldn't even say they suckness. I mean, they might suck, but I would say it's just that they don't care. Like it's just a job.
Sure, yeah.
They're hired to come in, make a movie that they didn't write.
They know it's probably going to be bad, so it's like, let's just get this over with.
Yeah, it's kind of that mentality. We don't really care. Whereas, I mean, I don't think the actors cared in this. I think that clearly some of the actors, by the time they left and by the time they like had actually done some of it, they were like, no, I'm like, I don't care about this. But Getty cared profusely about this. Yeah. He did everything he could to try and make his vision come to life. And oh man, it's almost a shame that we can't like talk to him about it, like interview him, ask him about like what he was thinking for various sections. And
yeah, it is actually like quite a bummer, and especially since it is something that seemed like so personal, it meant so much to him. The fact that he never got to see its release is actually pretty heartbreaking. Like when you first hear about it, it sounds like kind of a joke, like, ooh, a rich meth addict makes a movie and dies before it's finished. But then once you actually watch it and kind of start to see what it's about, and then again, we don't know anything about this guy other than he's rich and had a drug problem, but I mean, we don't know if maybe he might have been like a really solid, nice guy that had his problems. Maybe he wasn't a good dude. I don't know, but either way, it really sucks that he had this thing that he never got to see finished.
Yeah. I mean, it is worth mentioning. I just to go back to how ill-advised it is. This is definitely a movie that I would never let anyone who's not an adult watch, because you have to go into this knowing this is not a good portrayal of mentally ill people. It's just not. It is so like, it's actually a good thing that this is only going to be seen by people who really seek it out. Like, it's not right in front of people's faces, because I feel like that this would probably cause an absolute storm if
if this was like a big major release or something. People would be going crazy. Like, this is definitely something I want to recommend, but if I ever do tell someone to watch it, I am going to put the caveat, like, just to let you know, like, it's has a super insensitive portrayal, because if you don't want someone watching it if they're particularly sensitive or know people that are like this, that it's it might be definitely kind of a hard watch. I even had hard times watching it at certain points, but I still if any of this at all sounds interesting to someone, I would definitely recommend seeking it out, because it's I again don't want to say, oh, this is a great movie, you'll love it, but it's a very, very interesting, one of a kind watch that there's not a lot of stuff like this where you can say, like, it's crazy that this got made.
Yeah, there's nothing like this one specifically. Like, name me another movie where one rich guy made it over 50 years. It's one of a kind. Yeah. I think if you're fascinated by those kind of oddities of cinema, you'll be intrigued as you watch it, maybe horrified at times, but you'll get something out of it. I wouldn't recommend this to average folk, though. I wouldn't recommend this. No. If you just want good movies, stay far away. It's not that, but it's.
I like, that's a good way to put it. An oddity of cinema. I like that.
Yes, it's an oddity. It's something that was made outside the system, and not even just the major studios, just outside of any kind of cinema system, outside of any movie studio. It's one man's unfiltered, delirious vision, and it's say what you want about it. It is what it is. Like, it's untouched. It's just his and no one else's, and it's, for better or worse, it exists. So,
Oh boy.
Oh man.
And again, I just want to say this is something that's been on my radar for a while now. I'm really glad that we finally were able to do it, because I've been wanting to watch it, but I knew like this isn't something I can watch on my own and not have someone to talk about it
Oh yeah,
with.
I honestly I put this on thinking I'd be going to sleep and maybe finishing the rest of it and like after I slept, but like as soon as it got to like who this character was, my jaw was like just on the floor and I was too awake. It woke me up. I'm like, what is this movie? Tell me it's not doing this. Like I was in shock about who the main character was for a good like 15 minutes when they revealed it, and then by the time I kind of got used to it, I mean it was never okay. But when I got used to it, it was like, okay, where's it going now? Just as I was getting used to the fact that we had this character, that's when he started talking to himself about killing things. I'm like, oh no, what you do? No. Oh man, it is a rare beast to examine and dissect, and
I really wonder like how I would feel about it if they took the aspect, the mentally challenged aspect out of it and just had like, you know, there's no reason why you couldn't have done it as like a guy that's just having trouble sleeping and is tormented by dreams, and then he gets this mirror that starts doing stuff.
Yeah, or even do it with someone who's a bit younger, like actually have it be like a teenager who's maybe a bit more susceptible, and like, it's just about, you know, just have it be about someone who's turning into a serial killer, but this is in their head is how they turn to like they've got like another version of them in their head telling them to be a serial killer. Like that's an okay premise for a movie, but this is just oh man. So I guess we have the really weird task of rating this out of 10, which
it's
unrateable
really
almost. Like I don't know how you rate this, because I think in terms of filmmaking, it's at best like a 2 or 3. Not because it looks that bad, but just in the sense that it's cobbled together, in the sense that the actors' haircuts are changing from scene to scene, and in sense of like there's some weird alien bits of dialogue. In terms of being insensitive, you're down at a really low number. But then there's those moments of creativity, and there's also that unique factor where I'm not going to see anything else like this for the rest of this year, or probably for the next 10 years. That this is going to be in my head forever now. It's like I'm never going to forget The Evil Within.
Yeah,
it's going to be there. So I don't know.
This is super hard. And honestly, it's really just the insensitivity to it, because I feel like it still would have been maybe like a little strange, but I would have had a clearer level and maybe not have felt bad about giving it somewhat of a higher score. Not that it would have been like an 8 or 9 or anything, but
of course not. You'd be crazy. You'd be the crazy one. Like, forget the meth addict director. You'd be the one.
I think I'm still gonna give it like, I don't know if this sounds weirdly high for this movie, but I think I'm gonna give it a 4, which is because but it's one of those weird ratings where it's like, this is a 4, which sounds like a really low rating, but it is a 4 that I enjoyed. Maybe to the point even more than like some movies I might have rated like 5 or something. Or
I think I might agree with the 4 actually. I think 4 is a really good number to go with, because there's a lot of things that are really bad about it. There's a lot of things like I said, the cobbled togetherness, the inconsistencies, the insensitive nature of it. But it's so crazy as a movie, and there's some genuine creepy, like inventive little scares and moments that it does kind of rise it up to about a 4. Yeah. So
because I feel like a 2 or a 3 would be like, don't even bother watching it. I think a 4 is the threshold where it's like, this is still watchable.
Yeah. Okay, I guess that's The Evil Within. So, if you have seen this, let us know what you think about it in the comments.
I'd be really interested to see anyone else that's seen it, what they think.
Or on Twitter at mailed_fuzz if you want to do that. You can support us over at patreon.com/mailedfuzztv. You get a monthly vote over there for our streams and episode. There's also the new commentary tier. The first month of commentaries are actually free for everyone on patreon.com/mailedfuzztv. You can go over there and just get access to those if you want, with no charge. So, But otherwise, like and subscribe, all that stuff. Keep in mind, we're doing a lot of extra episodes this month. They'll be coming thick and fast. So look forward to those. And of course, we're taking the first week in November off because October's so busy and packed. But yeah. So thanks very much for watching. We'll see you next time. Keep watching scary movies, guys. Goodbye.